The House will be in order. The prayer will be offered today by our guest chaplain, Reverend Dennis Colbreth, First Baptist Church, Jasper, Alabama.
Our Heavenly Father, I want to thank you so much for the privilege we have to pray to you today. You are the creator of all. It is through you that we can have hope and we can have grace. Father, you have blessed our country as no other country has been blessed. I pray, Lord, that you will never let this body forget your goodness and your mercy to us all. Guide these legislatures in such a way that your will is promoted throughout the world. Continue to use our country as a beacon on the hill. It is because of your mercy our country is a light of hope, shining in a lost and a dark world. Dear Lord, please let us never take this freedom for granted. As these representatives gather from across the nation, we ask for your guidance, for your wisdom, as these men and women seek to make decisions that affect the lives of every American here at home and across the world. And this I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. What purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee rise?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, I would demand a vote on the Speaker's approval of the journal.
The questions on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal. Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The journal is approved.
Mr. Speaker, I respectfully object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. Pledge of allegiance today will be led by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Reyes.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Without objection, the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Aderholt, is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my honor and my privilege this afternoon to welcome our guest chaplain, Dr. Dennis Colbreth, who gave today's opening prayer. Dr. Colbreth, as senior pastor, serves a congregation of 2,400 at First Baptist Church in Jasper, Alabama. Prior to his tenure at First Baptist Church in Jasper, he served the congregations across Alabama, Virginia, and Georgia. In addition to his service within his congregation, Dr. Colbreth has also been an active member of the senior executive leadership team for the North American Mission Board and the Virginia Baptist Convention. Dr. Colbreth earned his Bachelor of Arts at Samford University, his Master's of Divinity at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, and his doctorate at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. He is a native of Evergreen, Alabama, and enjoys spending time with his family, wife Mary Beth, his children Andrew, Matthew, and Grace, as well as playing an occasional round of golf. Dr. Colbreth is a devoted and inspired leader in our community, and it's a privilege to have him here today to be with us and to give our opening prayer. It's my honor to serve him, his family, and his congregation in the 4th Congressional District of Alabama. And again, I welcome Dr. Colbreth to the United States House of Representatives this afternoon. I yield back the balance of my time.
The Chair will entertain up to 15 further requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe.
Request permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, the White Ribbon Campaign's theme is no excuse for abuse. Crystal Harris was raped by her abusive husband, and it was not the first time he hurt her, abused her, or even threatened her. But this particular crime and rape was caught on tape, so Sean Harris was convicted and sent to prison for 6 years. It sounds like justice prevailed. The outlaw was put away, but that's not the rest of the story. A judge ordered that once the sex offender husband gets out of jail for rape, the victim must pay him $1,000 a month in spousal support. And get this, she has to pay the legal bills for the divorce, his legal bills. The victim has to pay the rapist. It should be the other way around. The criminal should be paying Crystal restitution, because rape is never the fault of the victim, and a victim never owes the perpetrator anything. No judge, no law should force victims to financially support convicted rapists, because there is no excuse for abuse, and that's just the way it is.
Gentleman from Tennessee, for what purpose do you rise?
Address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The chaplain of the day asked God to look over this Congress. I asked God, and think the preacher should have asked, for direction a little bit further, to look over the Supreme Court. Because the Supreme Court has in its hands the Affordable Care Act. And a report was just issued yesterday that said in my home city of Memphis, African-American women are twice as likely to die of breast cancer than Caucasian women. And that's unacceptable. Part of that is because they don't get the health care they need. And the Affordable Care Act will see to it that everybody gets access to affordable health care, that there won't be a disparity twice as much for the cost of insurance for women than men, and that mammograms will be offered to people, ladies, without a copay. If the Affordable Care Act passes, that disparity in health between white women and black women in my city and in America will end, and that is wrong. Part of what's happened in my city is a vestige of Jim Crow, and even though those laws have been repealed, we still suffer from them. And there's a lot in the Affordable Care Act that will end those. I hope the Supreme Court rules on the side of life. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman from Ohio. Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, 1 week ago today, I introduced 4232 with my colleague from Ohio, Congressman Tim Ryan. The Restore the Freedom of Information Act is a common-sense bipartisan bill that would make it easier for American taxpayers seeking information from the federal government's multi-billion-dollar bailout programs. When the executive branch ceases to function as an arm of the government and begins taking ownership of private enterprise, they should not be able to hide behind the Freedom of Information Act restrictions and keep secret their dealings and the use of taxpayers' dollars. In the auto bailout, the administration actively took away the pensions of Delphi's salary retirees and now refuses to release documents to tell the taxpayers how this happened. Mr. Speaker, whether it's the auto industry, the financial sector, or even a future bailout, taxpayers deserve access to this information, and H.R. 4232 will do just that. The Restore the Freedom of Information Act will ensure that the administration cannot continue to hide its decisions from public scrutiny and deny American taxpayers the access they deserve.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Virginia. Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, budgets are about values. The budget we're about to debate today, the Republican budget, does not reflect American values. It is a budget for the survival of the fittest. It cuts the highest tax bracket from 35% to 25%. That's going to add $5 trillion to the debt. In order to compensate for that, this budget cuts $5.7 trillion into domestic discretionary spending. If this budget were ever to become law, it would push back all the progress we've made over generations in terms of malnutrition, in terms of poverty rates, in terms of protecting our seniors. It is a budget that would make Charles Darwin blush. It is a budget not worthy of this House, and it is a budget I hope will be resoundingly rejected because of the values that do not reflect America at its best. And I yield back.
Gentleman from Arkansas, for what purpose do you rise? Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize the achievements of the Mammoth Spring High School boys basketball team. This season, the Bears went 36-7 and claimed Arkansas's Class 1A state championship trophy after defeating the Sacred Heart Rebels by a score of 42-39. This is the first ever state championship victory for the boys basketball team, and it's a great source of pride for the Mammoth Spring community. I'd like to commend head coach Jeremy Cute for his leadership in claiming the state championship. Additionally, I'd like to recognize players Mason Brown, Seth Brown, Joey Bush, Wayne Coffey, Houston Cooper, Craig Hoover, J.D. Major, Tyler Mullins, Josh Parker, Ryan Robertson, Courtly Rutledge, Dylan Skaggs, A.J. Smith, Matt Turnbow, and Garrett Wooldridge for the leadership they've shown. Great accomplishments like a state championship don't happen without a great deal of dedication. The Mammoth Spring Bears and their head coach have put Mammoth Spring on the map and brought a great deal of pride to their community. Now that the boys basketball team has brought a state championship trophy home to Mammoth Spring, I have no doubt that the players will set new, even higher goals to achieve. Congratulations once again to the Bears and the entire Mammoth Spring community for their state championship victory.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose the gentleman from Texas rise? Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I proudly stand with and join millions of Americans in remembering the life and legacy of one of our greatest civil rights pioneers in our Latino community, Cesar Chavez. An advocate for social justice, Cesar Chavez dedicated his life to giving voice to those that couldn't speak for themselves. Cesar Chavez advocated for strong health care for communities. He advocated for good-paying jobs where people could lead the kinds of lives that our country cherishes and honors. Cesar Chavez was a Navy veteran who perhaps during World War II was disappointed in the way that segregation existed in the armed services. But it gave him the passion to go out and do the kind of work that today we celebrate, a legacy that was adopted by President Obama in the words of Cesar Chavez, who always thought, "Si se puede," yes, we can. And so today I proudly stand here and remind us that we have so much to be grateful to those that have advocated in our respective communities, Cesar Chavez, Martin Luther King, and so many others. I yield back.
For what purpose the gentlelady from Tennessee rise?
To address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my
Without
remarks.
objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, President Obama's Obamacare plan not only raises many constitutional questions, but it is creating an environment where younger Americans like my little nephew, Preston James Hunter, who was born last night, will be forced to live in a world with less choice and higher health care costs. As the cost of health care rises, we are seeing that taxpayers are on the hook for even more money. Now, we all know that this bill pulled $500 billion out of Medicare, and now we're learning that over the next few years, the states are going to have to pay another $620 billion for Medicaid expansion. Yes, $620 billion for Medicaid expenditures for Tennessee, my home state. TennCare estimates that the health care law will increase TennCare enrollment by 242,291 people. That is at an extra cost of $225 million a year. Those are just the estimates. While the President and Democrats in Washington are raiding Medicare, Republicans in the House are fighting back and working to protect Medicare for our seniors. Also, the jobs-killing aspect of Obamacare. We now find 20 new and increased taxes that are in this bill that are affecting American families and employers. We simply cannot afford a forced health care plan that doesn't work, raises taxes, and many Americans believe is unconstitutional. Yield back.
For what purpose the gentleman from California rise?
Address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise in recognition of a great civil activist, Cesar E. Chavez. This week we celebrate the life of a man who symbolizes dignity and respect, who would have turned 85 years of old on March 31st. He was a farm laborer, a leader, a co-founder of the United Farm Workers, and a veteran. He brought social justice to migrant workers' communities that included better pay, improving housing, and outlawing the child labor law and human dignity. And he achieved all of this through the use of nonviolence. For over 10 years, I have worked to create a national holiday to commemorate Cesar Chavez. Please join me in celebrating the life of a great American hero by supporting my legislation, House Resolution 130, which designates the fourth Friday of every March as Cesar E. Chavez Day. Martin Luther King Jr. once telegraphed Cesar Chavez with a message: our separate struggles are really one, a struggle for freedom, for dignity, and for humanity. The legacy of Cesar Chavez will continue to inspire not only Latinos, but people across our nation who believe in the American dream. Si se puede. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Illinois. Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, this week, the Chicagoland region hit a record high for gas prices. Gas is $4.51 a gallon in the 10th District of Illinois and about $4.67 in the city of Chicago. At a time when family budgets are stretched to their limits, rising gas prices are contributing to many things, including rising food prices and skyrocketing bills at the pump. My energy plan includes investing in domestic energy and implementing an all-of-the-above approach, because these are bipartisan ideas, and we can and should support. Not only will this help reduce our dependence on foreign oil, but it will help create jobs right here at home and lower the cost of energy for small businesses and families across the country. We must continue to explore environmentally friendly forms of energy while utilizing the resources we have here at home. Let's come together on this important issue so that hardworking taxpayers and hardworking families can be assured that we are listening and putting their concerns above political rhetoric. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
For all purposes, the gentleman from America Samoa rise. Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, over the past 3 years, President Obama has passed legislation, introduced crucial programs, and offered important tax incentives to restore economic security to middle-class families across our nation. Immediately after assuming office, President Obama created the Middle Class Task Force, targeting at raising middle-class living standards and giving the middle class a voice in the White House. President Obama also expanded small business loan programs to give small business owners access to credit and boost job creation. He also extended the 2010 payroll tax cut through 2012 to give the average working family $1,000 a year and increased federal student aid to low-income college students. Mr. Speaker, I commend President Obama's bold leadership and vision and for his commitment in restoring economic security for our middle-class families across America. I yield back.
The gentleman's time expired. For what purpose the gentleman from Illinois rise? Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our nation is currently standing at a critical crossroads. Should Washington wade deeper into the red, or should we continue cutting spending and get our nation on the track towards fiscal solvency under the House Republican budget, which cuts more than $5 trillion while preventing the President's tax increases? In addition to paving a way for our nation to get back on track towards economic security and prosperity, the Republican budget also puts forward bipartisan solutions to save and strengthen Medicare for current seniors and for our children and our grandchildren. Under our current trajectory, Medicare will be bankrupt in just a decade. This plan preserves current Medicare plans for those in and nearing retirement while offering guaranteed coverage options for future seniors, including those with pre-existing conditions or a tough health history. It's financed by a premium support payment, which would provide more assistance to low-income and less healthy seniors. The Medicare plans will compete against one another, which ultimately will create lower costs and better quality of care. The budget refuels our economy to create an environment for businesses to grow jobs with fundamental tax reform, protects the security of health and retirement plans, and begins to reduce our deficit now to leave our children with a country free from debt. And I yield back.
For what purpose the gentleman from Rhode Island rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection. So ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong opposition to the Republican budget proposal offered by Mr. Ryan of Wisconsin. My home state of Rhode Island has one of the highest unemployment rates in the country. My constituents need common-sense solutions that will create jobs and get our country back on the right track, not another extreme proposal from the House Republican leadership. Unfortunately, this budget proposal would give the wealthiest Americans an average tax cut of $150,000 while slashing important support for middle-class families and investments that we need to grow our economy. And once again, House Republicans are proposing to end the Medicare guarantee for our seniors. In this case, by replacing it with a voucher program that would not be guaranteed to keep pace with rising health care costs, which could result in higher costs for our seniors and less quality care. I urge my colleagues to reject this proposal, and I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose, the gentlelady from New York rise?
Request 1 minute to speak to address the House.
Without objection, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to speak out about an important issue that faces our society, domestic violence and sexual abuse. Our country has a moral obligation to stand up against those who exploit power to commit violence against men, women, and children. In an effort to raise awareness of domestic violence and sexual abuse, my district kicked off the White Ribbon Campaign last week. The White Ribbon Campaign is led by men and encourages all members of the community, men, women, young and old, to join in their efforts. This male leadership helps to acknowledge the important contributions men have to make towards this effort and invite others to take a role. From March 23rd to April 1st, thousands of my constituents in central New York will be wearing a white ribbon or a white wristband to raise awareness about domestic violence and sexual violence. I encourage my House colleagues to join me in wearing a white ribbon to put a spotlight on this very important issue. Wearing the white ribbon demonstrates a personal pledge never to commit, condone, or remain silent about violence against men, women, or children. I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose, the gentlelady from California rise? Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today because the health of women and their families is threatened. It's threatened not only by the Supreme Court case across the street, but by the Republican budget right here in the House. The Affordable Care Act law protects women from being charged more for health insurance for simply being a woman. And it allows women to get health coverage and not be denied because giving birth may be considered a pre-existing condition. And it helps families, mothers and fathers, have a little bit of peace of mind in raising their children. Last Friday in my district, I met with Kathy Estrada and her son Nick. Kathy and her husband have worked hard and are doing the best they can to raise their sons. But as a young man, Nick, in his 20s, he's building a life, and it's incredibly expensive to buy health care insurance. He's a skateboarder, and she used to lay awake at night worrying that something might happen to him out on the streets, and she wouldn't be able to take care of him because he couldn't be on her insurance. But because of the Affordable Care Law, Kathy can rest easier because Nick can be covered on her insurance policy. The Affordable Care Law is today helping women and families of all ages across the country, and that's the way it should continue.
Gentlelady's time expired. Gentleman from Pennsylvania. Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, imagine you come to a fork in the road. You look on your GPS, and you see that the path to the left leads to an old bridge that is falling into the river. The path on the right leads to a brand new bridge that is guaranteed to get your car over the river. Obviously, everyone would go over the new bridge. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to Medicare, we have a GPS provided to us by the Medicare trustees. They clearly say that if we stay on the same road, Medicare will be broke by 2024. Republicans want to provide a new bridge that protects and preserves the program for current and future retirees, a program that gives future seniors the option to stay in traditional Medicare or to choose a new plan that best fits their needs. Unlike current Medicare, the Republican plan provides greater benefits for low-income and sick seniors and require more from wealthy seniors. The Medicare trustees have put up a bright orange sign saying, "Bridge out ahead." We can either heed their warnings and turn down a new path or plow right through and end up in the river. I yield back.
For what purpose, the gentleman from Georgia rise? Without objection. Or New Jersey.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to urge my colleagues here in the House to take action and create jobs by bringing Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century, or MAP 21, to the House floor for a vote. Yesterday, for the second time this week, Republican leadership pulled a short-term highway extension bill. Time is running out, and the 9th extension will be expiring Saturday, March 31st. If Congress does not act by Saturday, millions of construction jobs will be at risk. Gas taxes will not be collected, which can add up to about $90 million per day. 2 weeks ago, MAP 21 successfully passed the Senate with a bipartisan 74 to 22 votes. While it's not a perfect bill, MAP 21 is fully paid for and is estimated to save 1.8 million jobs and create up to 1 million more jobs. While I prefer the 5-year transportation bill, MAP 21 is legislation that both Republicans and Democrats can support. A transportation bill will not only improve our infrastructure, but will improve jobs and provide jobs. Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to bring up to the floor MAP 21 for a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to rise and address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday I had the opportunity over at the Supreme Court to witness the oral arguments on the individual mandate, and I believe I could tell on the face of the justices that there was significant skepticism about this provision of the Affordable Care Act. You know, if we were smart, this skepticism could open the way for thoughtful alternatives by this Congress. Mr. Speaker, I want to preserve and protect Medicare. Speaker Pelosi last year cut $500 billion from Medicare, and the President has placed his bets on a bureaucratic control board, the Independent Payment Advisory Board. A trustee's report from a year ago suggested that the Medicare Trust Fund will be exhausted in less than a decade. That doesn't seem like a viable way forward. We've got a budget resolution up this week to preserve and protect Medicare. You can ensure access to care in the future. This House has voted to repeal the Independent Payment Advisory Board, and maybe the Senate should take up the same action. We have to reduce spending that diverts thought and effort from patient care and free up resources that focuses on patients. We're committed to protecting our seniors in Medicare, lowering the deficit, and creating a workable system that allows good doctors to see more patients. I yield back the balance of my time.
Expired. Gentleman, the real gentleman from Georgia. Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, it's with sadness that I rise to honor the life of Anthony Dewan Boatwright, who passed away at the age of 11 Sunday night. Juan was 14 months old when he was left alone at his daycare center, fell into a bucket of water and bleach, and suffered irreversible brain damage. At that time, there was no law requiring Georgia licensed daycare centers to carry insurance or even let parents know that they didn't carry insurance. That meant that despite being awarded a $30 million jury verdict, Juan's family couldn't collect the money needed to care for Juan's life over the past 11 years. Juan's mother, Jackie, has led a courageous effort to correct this injustice, and in 2004, Georgia enacted a law requiring the daycare centers disclose their insurance status. Last Congress, Juan and Jackie's fight led the House to pass the Anthony Dewan Boatwright Act so that families across America would never again experience the same tragedy. During the last 11 years, Juan inspired a movement to protect the safety of children everywhere. Juan, your mother and I thank you for your life. You will be missed, but your legacy lives on. With that,
Gentleman's time expired. Another gentleman from Georgia. For what purpose do you rise?
To address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, it looks like the President's road to regulation nation is truly never-ending. Just yesterday, the EPA announced their latest set of regulations, which will effectively ban the building of any new coal-fired plants. This regulation comes on the heels of some of the most costly regulations in the history of the EPA, including the Utility MAC and Boiler MAC rules. He promised that his energy policies would mean electricity rates would necessarily skyrocket. One promise the President has kept. Coal is one of our most plentiful resources. Over 50% of our energy is provided by coal. We can no longer allow the White House to regulate this country into an energy crisis. It's time we start to take advantage of all the God-given natural resources this country has and have American-made energy power this nation. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman's time expired. The gentlelady from Washington.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am troubled by the Republican budget's effect on health care, specifically the provisions that would eliminate the Affordable Care Act. Passing the Republican budget
would be detrimental to the health of citizens across the United States, but it's particularly harmful to women. As we mark the anniversary of the Affordable Care Act, we can measure its successes by the benefits that women have already realized. Preventive care is guaranteed, gender rating will soon be gone, and access to contraceptives have expanded. This expansion is important for all women, not just those who use contraceptives for birth control. Now, my colleagues have and will share stories of women who have been put at risk by this budget. I'd like to share the story of Julie, an Oregonian whose contraceptives are important to her health on a daily basis to treat endometriosis. Without contraceptives, Julie would suffer from extreme pain and the risk of infertility. Under the Republican budget, her access to this medication could be in jeopardy. It is unconscionable to deny women access to treatments that can improve the quality of their lives. And I urge my colleagues to stand up for women and oppose the Republican budget. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentlelady from West Virginia. Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to bring attention once again to this administration's assault on our domestic energy production. For the past 3 years, I've been saying many times from this very podium that the EPA is overstepping its bounds and regulating where it cannot legislate and costing us American jobs. Last Friday evening, the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia overruled the EPA's veto of the Spruce Mines Clean Water Act permit. The decision stated, and this is a quote from the judge, that the EPA's veto was, quote unquote, unprecedented, and it had acted in a manner that was, quote, arbitrary, capricious, and not in accordance with the law. Could there be a clearer sign that we've been subjected to an overreach of executive power? This decision is a win for West Virginia, but we have a long way to go because the administration's so-called energy policies have led to higher gas prices and higher heating prices. We are blessed to have abundant natural resources in this country, particularly in my state of West Virginia. But this becomes irrelevant if the administration continues to hold these domestic resources hostage. All of the above means following the law.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentlelady from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, many people are smiling about the argument in the Supreme Court on the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. But I will tell you those children born with sickle cell and asthma are praying that Obamacare survives. Those elderly persons who fall into the donut hole with Medicare Part D are praying for Obamacare to survive. I am as well, Mr. Speaker, because I believe in a humanitarian approach to the service to our nation, help those who cannot help themselves. Then as we look forward to a vigorous debate on this Medicare project, this budget, Republican budget, I hope that we stand together against ending Medicare, destroying jobs, and moving forward on the lopsided help that we give to the wealthy over the poor. I also want to say that Trayvon Martin's parents were here yesterday, and I want to stand against victimizing the victim. We say to them in a forceful way that it is important for justice to be done. That justice is to assure the arrest of Mr. Zimmerman, who will not be alleged guilty, but will be innocent until proven guilty. But now is the time to heal this nation and to recognize that this case must move forward with justice for a little boy. I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from Arkansas, what purpose do you rise?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, Senator Lieberman, an independent from Connecticut, said, quote, "The truth is we cannot save Medicare as we know it. We can save Medicare only if we change it," end quote. I agree with Senator Lieberman. My mother's on Medicare, and I want to ensure care for our senior citizens by maintaining this program for those currently on Medicare and preserving it for future generations. Our budget, which we will vote on tomorrow, saves Medicare for current and future generations with no disruptions for those in and near retirement. Our reforms are not partisan. In fact, they are based on a bipartisan proposal by Chairman Ryan and Senator Ron Wyden, Democrat of Oregon. I urge my colleagues to support the GOP budget tomorrow because failure to take action to save this program today poses the greatest threat to the health and retirement security of America's seniors. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose did the gentlelady from Illinois rise? Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For too long, women have faced discrimination at the hands of insurance companies who label pregnancy as a pre-existing condition and then deny coverage or charge more for it. Aaron from Chicago writes, quote, "When I found out I was pregnant, I had full insurance coverage. I was told, however, that I did not have a pregnancy rider and therefore my pregnancy would not be covered. How can I pay for health insurance that will not cover a vital part of a woman's life? I was asked if I wanted to purchase the rider that would not take place for over 365 days, unquote. Well, thanks to Obamacare, insurers will no longer be able to get away with this. Beginning in 2014, insurers cannot deny or charge more for any pre-existing condition, and that would include pregnancy. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady's time has expired. This time we recognize the gentleman from New York. For what purpose do you rise? Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Here we go again. The deja vu all over again. Simply put, the Ryan-Romney Republican budget ends Medicare. AARP said the proposal lacks balance and jeopardizes the health and economic security of older Americans. The budget we will consider this week fails the test of balance, fairness, and shared responsibility. It showers the few Americans that are the very wealthy with an average tax cut of at least $150,000 while preserving giveaways to big oil companies and Wall Street CEOs. What's worse is that all these tax breaks would be paid for by ending Medicare and cutting education, basic research, and new sources of energy. Obviously, this budget rejects all of our American values. This is not the first time the other side has tried to end Medicare. They tried it last year, too. The American people rejected the Ryan proposal then, and they will reject this latest attack on our middle class now. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose, gentlelady from California rise?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, so ordered.
Budgets are about priorities. I think it should be about helping people climb the ladder of opportunity so they can live a good middle-class life, the American dream. But the Republican budget hurts the middle class. It provides billions in tax breaks for the wealthiest Americans, big oil, and special interests. Millionaires get an extra $150,000 in their pockets in tax cuts. How do the Republicans pay for this? This is how. They take some by slashing education, leaving 10 million students with less money for college. They steal some from our future economy, gutting investments in science and technology. But Republicans do the most damage to seniors. They end the Medicare guarantee. They shift medical costs to seniors. They basically let Medicare wither on the vine. These aren't my priorities or those of the American people. That's why I oppose the Republican budget.
Gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Florida rise?
I ask for unanimous consent to address the House, Mr. Chair.
With no exception, so ordered. Objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, this afternoon, I rise to thank those members and witnesses who joined together yesterday to discuss the tragic shooting of Trayvon Martin. Representative Conyers, Jackson Lee, Brown, Barbara Lee, Richmond, Nadler, Johnson, Green, Quigley, Rush, Deutsch, Yvette Clark, Danny Davis, Carson, Meeks, Sewell, Richardson, Waters, Chu, and Cohen. I cannot tell you how comforting it was, Mr. Speaker, to his parents and to everyone there to see such very strong support from this body. Together, we can continue to apply pressure in the case of Trayvon Martin, a little boy from my district, District 17, Miami-Dade County, Florida. and together we can make a difference. 32 days and still no justice. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The lady's time has expired. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on the motion to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered, or on which the vote incurs objection under Clause 6 of Rule 20. Any recorded vote on the postponed question will be taken later. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to meet at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Without objection, so ordered. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1339 as amended.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1339, a bill to amend Title 32, United States Code, the body of laws of the United States dealing with the National Guard, to recognize the city of Salem, Massachusetts, as the birthplace of the National Guard of the United States.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Platts, and the gentlewoman from Maine, Ms. Songus, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I might consume and ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks on the bill under consideration.
Hearing no objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in strong support of H.R. 1339, recognizing the city of Salem, Massachusetts, as the birthplace of the National Guard of the United States. I would like to thank my colleague from Massachusetts, the Honorable Mr. John Tierney, for bringing this measure before the House, and I'm honored to be a co-sponsor of this legislation with him. It was in 1629 that Captain John Endicott organized the first militia in the Massachusetts Bay Colony in Salem, and that all males between the ages of 16 and 20 participated in the defense of that community. Each week, this first regiment diligently practiced drill and provided guard detail to protect the colony throughout each night. This militia, and those that followed, will come to play a significant role in the Revolutionary War and all conflicts that have followed. Today, the National Guard continues its proud mission of providing units for the first line in defense of our great nation at home and throughout the world. By designating the city of Salem, Massachusetts, as the birthplace of the National Guard of the United States, we hope to see positive tourism and economic developments in the city, a city already recognized throughout the world as one of immense historical significance. But most importantly, Mr. Speaker, this resolution will instill pride in both the local and state communities in their rich patriotic heritage and properly recognizes the critically important role that the National Guard has played in defense of our nation and its citizens since the earliest days of our nation. As the oldest component of the armed forces of the United States, the services our National Guard has provided our country are innumerable and immense. I'm honored to be here today to be part of the history and the formal recognition of this, the National Guard's birthplace. I encourage my colleagues to join me in support of this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from Maine is recognized.
Massachusetts.
Close.
Not close enough. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I might consume. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to offer my support for H.R. 1339, recognizing the great city of Salem, Massachusetts as the birthplace of the National Guard of the United States. I'd like to thank my colleague from Massachusetts, Mr. Tierney, for bringing this important measure, of which I am an original co-sponsor, before the House. The National Guard has provided over 370 years of dedicated service to our country, beginning in 1629, when the first militia was organized in the Massachusetts Bay Colony in Salem by Captain John Endicott. The National Guard has played a key role in protecting the nation and responding to contingencies around the globe. The National Guard is the oldest component of the armed forces of the United States. The patriots who founded our nation followed English military tradition and organized their able-bodied male citizens into militias. All males between the ages of 16 and 60 were expected to maintain arms and participate in the defense of the community. The colonial militias protected their countrymen from foreign invaders and helped to win the Revolutionary War. Following the war, our forefathers empowered Congress to, quote, provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, unquote. However, recognizing the militia's state role, the Founding Fathers reserved the appointment of officers and training of the militia to the states. Today's National Guard still remains a dual state-federal force. The service of our Guard is just as vital today as it was in the days of our forefathers. The Guard deployed more than 50,000 troops in support of the Gulf states following Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Tens of thousands of Guard members have served in harm's way in Iraq and Afghanistan. Today, the National Guard continues its historic dual mission, responding to state and local emergencies while ably and courageously serving our nation overseas in times of war alongside their active duty and reserve counterparts. And so I am proud to stand here today to recognize Salem, Massachusetts as a city of great historical significance and the birthplace of our National Guard. I urge my colleagues to stand with me in support of this resolution. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I continue to reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Massachusetts, the author of the underlying legislation.
Gentleman's recognized.
Well, I thank my colleague from Massachusetts for yielding, as well as for taking the time to help manage this bill and for being an original co-sponsor. And I thank my colleague from Pennsylvania as well for co-sponsoring this bill and for his kind words and a discussion on what it is and how meaningful it is, not just to Salem, Massachusetts, but to the country as well. I rise in support of this bill to officially recognize Salem, Massachusetts as the birthplace of the National Guard. Salem was the site where our country's first military regiment mustered. This militia was the foundation of what would eventually become the National Guard. Last year I offered a version of this legislation as an amendment to the Defense Authorization Bill, and it was approved by a voice vote. Unfortunately, the amendment was not included as part of the final conference report, so for the past several months we've been working together to bring this bill to the floor. Next month is the 375th anniversary of that first muster on Salem Common, and it's being commemorated, so I'm particularly pleased that the House is considering the bill at this time. I want to be clear, consideration of this bill today was made possible because of bipartisan support, and just like my two colleagues here, there were a number of people, over 116 co-sponsors from both parties, who participated in bringing this bill, and I want to thank the majority leader as well as the leadership on both sides for their courtesy given to the staff as well as to me. Also want to thank the House Armed Services Committee Chairman, Buck McKean, as well as the Ranking Member, Adam Smith, and their staffs. And I want to note the 116 colleagues, Republicans and Democrats, all the Democrats in the Armed Services Committee, and a substantial number of Republicans on that committee for their support. This kind of consideration is just the way this House should behave and should act, and I'm glad that we were able to do it on this bill. So today is an important day for the City of Salem and for the National Guard, and for local residents like Larry Conway and many others who have been advocating for this designation for years. Designating Salem as the birthplace of the National Guard will pay tribute to those who first organized to defend our country almost 375 years ago, and will also honor those men and women who continue to serve in the National Guard today. We're working closely with our Senate counterparts to ensure that that chamber acts quickly in time for the 375th anniversary next month. I won't recount all the details that my colleagues here were so kind to enumerate, but do note that the bill itself sets forth all the important benchmarks and the progress that we've made. Again, I want to thank my colleagues. I urge all of the colleagues to support this bipartisan bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
I continue to reserve the balance of my time, Mr. Speaker.
Gentlelady from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
All time having yielded. Gentleman is recognized.
So, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to add, again, my words of thanks and commendation to the gentleman from Massachusetts for sponsoring this resolution, because as was reflected in honoring the birthplace of the National Guard, we honor all who have served throughout our nation's history. And during my State House days, as well as now in Congress, I've had remarkable privilege to interact with both my Air and Army National Guard in Pennsylvania, as well as with National Guard troops from around the country in my many visits to Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere. And these are remarkable men and women, citizen soldiers through and through, who, when called upon, respond to the call of their nation and their fellow citizens and serve us so courageously. So, again, honored to be a sponsor of this resolution and commend the gentleman for introducing it and urge a yes vote in support of its passage. Yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Therefore, the question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1339 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
Mr. Speaker, I request
For what purpose,
yeas,
gentlelady, right? Yeas and nays have been requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives. Sir, this is to notify you formally, pursuant to Rule 8 of the Rules of the House of Representatives, that I have been served with a subpoena for documents issued by the Superior Court for the State of California, North Valley District, in connection with a civil case currently pending before that court. After consultation with the Office of General Counsel, I have determined that because the subpoena is not material and relevant, compliance with the subpoena is inconsistent with the privileges and precedents of the House. Signed sincerely, Karen L. Haas, Clerk of the House.
For what purpose the gentleman from Georgia rise?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 597 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 122, House Resolution 597, resolved that at any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved and to the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the concurrent resolution, House Concurrent Resolution 112, establishing the budget for the United States government for fiscal year 2013 and setting forth appropriate budgetary levels for fiscal years 2014 through 2022. The first reading of the concurrent resolution shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the concurrent resolution are waived. General debate shall not exceed 4 hours, with 3 hours of general debate confined to the congressional budget, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Budget, and 1 hour of general debate on the subject of economic goals and policies, equally divided and controlled by Representative Brady of Texas and Representative Hinchey of New York, or their respective designees. After general debate, the concurrent resolution shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. The concurrent resolution shall be considered as read. No amendment shall be in order except those printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution. Each amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, and shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent. All points of order against such amendments are waived, except that the adoption of an amendment in the nature of a substitute shall constitute the conclusion of consideration of the concurrent resolution for amendment. After the conclusion of consideration of the concurrent resolution for amendment and a final period of general debate, which shall not exceed 20 minutes, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Budget, the committee shall rise and report the concurrent resolution to the House with such amendment as may have been adopted. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the concurrent resolution and amendments thereto to adoption without intervening motion except amendments offered by the Chair of the Committee on the Budget pursuant to Section 305A5 of the Congressional Budget Act of 1974 to achieve mathematical consistency. The concurrent resolution shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question of its adoption. Section 2. It shall be in order at any time on the legislative day of March 29, 2012, for the Speaker to entertain motions that the House suspend the rules as though under Clause 1 of Rule 15 relating to a measure extending expiring surface transportation authority.
The gentleman from Georgia is now recognized for 1 hour.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you and I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Hearing no objections, so ordered.
And, Mr. Speaker, for the purposes of debate only, I'd like to yield 30 minutes to my colleague from New York, pending which time I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
And all time is yielded for debate only. Mr. Speaker, it's Budget Day. It's Budget Day, and we get to begin that in the Rules Committee. Now, I have the great pleasure in this body as a freshman of serving on both the Rules Committee and the Budget Committee. So you can imagine the sincerity with which I bring my enthusiasm to the floor today. And coming here as a freshman who believes in an open process, who believes that we ought to have the opportunity to bring all ideas before the American people and let the 435 members of the People's House express their opinion, I'm proud to tell you that the rule that is before us today allows for not one budget to be debated, not 2 budgets to be debated, not 3, not 4, not 5, and not 6, Mr. Speaker, but the rule that we bring today allows for 7 different visions of the United States budget to be brought before this institution and debated. That is every single budget that was introduced, offered yesterday, Mr. Speaker, in front of the Rules Committee. And candidly, had more members submitted budgets, had we had 11, had we had 12, we would have made those in order too, because this debate that we will have over these next 2 days, Mr. Speaker, is a debate about the vision that we have in this body for this country. And I am so proud of the vision that was voted, reported out of the Budget Committee, and it will be made in order by this rule. The options we'll have before us, Mr. Speaker, is made in order by this rule. Include the President's budget. You may remember last year, Mr. Speaker, the President submitted his budget to Congress, and not a single member of the House offered that budget on the floor. It was offered in the Senate. It didn't get any votes. It was defeated 97-0, but it was offered there. This year, we're going to be able to look at the President's budget and debate that here on the floor of the House for the first time in my term. We're going to have a budget offered by the Congressional Black Caucus today that lays out a vision for America, that talks about taxation, that talks about revenues and spending and where we should prioritize. We have a bipartisan budget that's been introduced, Mr. Speaker, that will come before the floor of this House, again, to be debated in its entirety. We have the Progressive Caucus budget that's coming. We have the Republican Study Committee budget that is coming. And, Mr. Speaker, we have the Democratic Caucus substitute that is coming, all to compete with, in this grand arena of ideas, the budget that we reported out of the Budget Committee. I see my colleague from Wisconsin, with whom I have the great pleasure of serving on the Budget Committee. We went through amendment after amendment after amendment, some 30 amendments offered and considered, debated, some with bipartisan support, some with bipartisan opposition, to create this one budget that will be the foundation for the budget debate, Mr. Speaker, if this rule is enacted. I don't know how we could have done it any better in the Rules Committee, and I hope that's what we'll hear from my friend from New York. Again, every single budget that was offered, and that was the invitation put out by the Speaker. Just to be clear, the openness and the invitation was, Mr. Speaker, come one, come all. If you have a competing vision, send it to the Rules Committee. We'll make it in order on the floor so that we can have the kind of open debate that's going to make America proud. This is the beginning of that right here, Mr. Speaker, right now. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentlelady from New York. I was thinking California. From New York.
I thank you very much, and I thank the gentleman for his kindness in yielding me the customary 30 minutes and yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the Rules Committee did fine. It was open and it allowed all the budgets, as he said, to be brought to the floor. It's what we have to work with that is concerning to me, because the budget's a reflection of our values, and through that prism, the Ryan budget that we're considering today is morally bankrupt. The budget that the majority proposes today puts corporations and the wealthiest Americans above the needs of working and middle-class families. It increases military spending while slashing the safety net for the middle class and protects tax loopholes for corporations that ship jobs overseas. In short, this extreme partisan proposal takes a hatchet to the notion of shared responsibility and places the financial burdens of a generation upon the shoulders of seniors, the poor, and the middle class. Under this budget, the millionaires will receive multiple tax cuts totaling at least $300,000, and not a single corporate tax loophole would be closed. Under this budget, we would see the end of Medicare as we know it. In its place, seniors would be offered the option of a fixed-price voucher with which they may go into the market to find their own insurance, with no guarantee that the voucher you receive will come even close to covering the cost of the health care. Meanwhile, the landmark Affordable Health Care Act, which is the first law to start addressing the soaring cost of health care, would be repealed. Repeal of the law would mean that children under 26 could no longer be insured by their parents. Millions of Americans suffering from chronic diseases could once again be denied care. I don't think many Americans, certainly I didn't know it, understand. I learned this during the Clinton health care debate, that most policies have a yearly and a lifetime limit. As a matter of fact, at that time when we were debating the Clinton health care plan, that limit was about $1 million, which means that an emergency like head trauma from a car accident, a bike accident, or just a workplace error on a construction site could lead you to reaching your limit, and you would no longer be eligible for health insurance. Let me say that in another way. Once you reach that limit with your pre-existing condition, you would be uninsurable in the United States for the rest of your life. The health care bill that everybody's talking about now does away with that, both yearly limits and lifetime limits. Now, right now, most individuals still change this danger, but thanks to the Affordable Care Act, lifetime and yearly limits will be phased out in 2014. That's a very important part of this bill. People who want to repeal health care have said absolutely nothing about what they expect to replace it with. We would assume that people with pre-existing conditions could no longer get coverage. Under the Republican budget, those protections would be taken away and the vulnerable Americans would be left to figure out how to survive on their own. And we talk about the mandate to buy insurance. Right now, under the present law, we are all paying for people who are uninsured. Those people who choose not to buy insurance, who have to go to the hospital for emergencies or any other reason, are paid for. They are treated by the law, but we pay the cost. It is estimated in some areas that we spend $1,000 a year more, those of us who are insured, simply to cover the uninsured. Now, you can continue doing that and paying everybody else's health care costs, or we can keep this health care bill, which is so important to us. The Republican budget not only takes from the poor and gives to the rich, it even fails to fulfill the promise of a balanced budget. Just this morning, Politico published an article entitled, quote, "Ryan Plan Puts GOP in Long-Term Budget Bind," end quote. In the article, the author writes, quote, "It is a bold, even bellicose election year challenge. But the strict revenue limits could postpone for a generation the conservative promise of a balanced budget," end quote. Even the majority themselves admit this plan will add $3.1 trillion to our deficit between 2013 and 2022. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert the article from Politico into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Under the majority's plan, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office estimates that all government spending, except for Social Security,